Some books, they just tell a great story. But then, every once in a while, a book comes along that actually rewrites history. Today, we're talking about Chinua Achebe's masterpiece, Things Fall Apart. And believe me, this novel did so much more than just tell a story. It was a powerful, calculated response that literally changed literature forever.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the story that was being told wrong. Then, we'll see how Achebe decided to write back against that narrative, reclaim his people's history, completely transform the English language, and finally, we'll dig into the powerful legacy of this incredible book.
So to really get why this book is such a big deal, we first have to understand the problem Achebe was up against. We have to talk about the deeply, deeply flawed way Africa's story was being told to the rest of the world. And really, it all boils down to this question. What happens when your story is told by someone else? Before Achebe came along, the narrative about Africa was almost totally controlled by outsiders, specifically by colonial powers. And that, as you can imagine, had some massive consequences.
A really key idea here is something called Orientalism. The scholar Edward Said broke this down brilliantly. He argued that the West basically invented this distorted, super simplified, and often pretty demeaning image of places like Asia and the Middle East, the Orient, to make them seem backward and, well, in need of colonial rule. And that exact same lens was pointed squarely at Africa.
And look, this wasn't just, a few biased books here and there. We are talking about a whole history, a systematic misrepresentation of an entire continent. The stories coming out of Europe consistently painted a picture that served their own colonial interests, not the truth of the people who actually lived there. So how in the world do you fight back against that? Well, Achebe's answer became one of the most powerful responses in the history of literature. This is where he completely changes the game. And he wasn't just any author. There's a very good reason people call him the father of modern African literature. He wasn't just writing a book. He was lighting a fire, starting an entire literary tradition from a truly African point of view. What he was doing is a strategy we now call writing back to the center. Think about it. Instead of just sitting back and accepting the story Europe was telling, he stood up and actively challenged it. He questioned it. He offered a powerful counterstory, all from the perspective of the people being colonized. He pulled this off using 3 absolutely brilliant strategies. First, he put his own indigenous culture front and center. Second, he took the colonizers' language, English, and made it his own. And third, he showed, without holding back, the true devastating impact of colonialism. So let's break down that first strategy, reclaiming history. For Achebe, this meant showing the entire world what his Igbo society was really like, long before any European colonizers showed up on the scene. And I mean, the difference is just staggering. It's night and day. On one side, you've got the colonial caricature, this primitive land with no real culture. But then, on the other side, Achebe shows us the reality, a deeply complex and sophisticated society with its own laws, its own religion, its own intricate social structures. But here's what's so incredibly smart about what he did. Achebe wasn't trying to paint some perfect, romanticized picture of the past. He made it a point to show the flaws within his own society right alongside its strengths. He refused to just create a simple, idealized counter-image. He deliberately set his work apart from other movements at the time, like Negritude, which sometimes did idealize the past. Achebe insisted on showing the full, messy, complicated, and sometimes difficult truth of his culture. He understood that to truly reclaim your history, you have to own all of it, the good and the bad. Okay, now for his second masterstroke, what he did with language. Honestly, this was nothing short of revolutionary. So instead of writing in his native Igbo language, he made a radical choice. He took the language of the colonizer, English, and he completely remade it. He infused it with Igbo speech patterns, with local proverbs, with a whole different way of seeing the world. He essentially created a new kind of English, an Africanized English, that could actually carry the weight of his experience. This idea is just so powerful. He took the very tool that was used to dominate and control his people, and he turned it into a weapon for their liberation and self-expression. It was an incredible act of appropriation. And that brings us to the very heart of the novel's title and its tragic power, showing the real, devastating cultural and psychological damage that colonialism caused.
The novel is just this profound, heartbreaking illustration of what the writer Amy Césaire is talking about here. It's not just about a political or military takeover. It's not a society being completely drained of its essence, its culture trampled, its core institutions just undermined and destroyed. And the ending of the book, it just delivers this final, crushing blow. After everything that's happened, after witnessing the immense tragedy of the main character Okonkwo, the Colonial District Commissioner casually thinks about the book he's going to write about it all. And there it is. That's the title he chooses. An entire human tragedy, the collapse of a civilization, all of it reduced to a single, arrogant, dehumanizing sentence. It is the ultimate proof that the colonial mindset was completely, totally incapable of seeing the humanity of the people it was destroying.
So, in the end, Things Fall Apart leaves us wrestling with this huge, essential question. Achebe used English to give his people a powerful voice on the world stage. But did that choice also, in a way, reinforce the very power structures he was trying to tear down? It's a complicated legacy, and it's one that his absolute masterpiece forces every single one of us to confront.